The silence in the great house was not merely an absence of noise. It was a cultivated, polished entity, a palpable presence like the cold, smooth glass protecting a priceless old master painting. Clara moved through the high-ceiling rooms with the measured, silent grace of a museum attendant after hours, her stockinged feet whispering over the intricate herringbone parquet that gleamed with the ghostly reflection of a dozen strategically placed downlights. Each room was a still life of impeccable taste, a single dramatic calla lily in a slender Murano vase, shelves of leather-bound books arranged not by author, but by the gradation of their spine colors from cream to charcoal, chairs so perfect in their Georgian lines they seemed to defy the very notion of being sat upon. The house, a wedding gift from Daniel's family, was a restored Palladian villa in the city's most exclusive, tree-lined enclave. It was less a home and more a testament to a certain kind of achievement, a diorama of flawless living. And she, Clara, was its chief conservator, its most carefully maintained exhibit. Daniel was a cardiac electrophysiologist, a man who navigated the body's most intimate electrical storms with the cool precision of a master electrician rewiring a faulty national grid. His love for her was, she had come to understand, akin to his appreciation for a perfectly regular sinus rhythm on an EKG monitor, a sign of correct, orderly, predictable function. Their life together, now spanning 5 years, was a masterclass in harmonious efficiency. His clinic, her largely ceremonial role on the boards of two cultural charities, their dinners at Michelin-starred establishments, where the sommelier knew his vintage preferences by heart. They were by all external metrics a golden couple. Yet in the cavernous quiet of the villa, Clara sometimes felt a scream building in her throat, a silent, pressurized wave that threatened to shatter the acres of polished glass and curated calm. The silence was so profound it had weight, texture. It was the sound of a life being expertly preserved rather than lived. The first crack in this exquisite vitrine appeared, as these things often do, as a minor, practical nuisance. The concert grand piano in the west-facing music room, a formidable Bechstein that had been Daniel's grandmother's pride, and a symbol of a cultured lineage, developed a peculiar, muffled thud in the tenor register. The note, a F sharp above middle C, no longer rang clear. It emerged as if wrapped in felt, dying almost instantly in a dull, apologetic cough. The renowned technician they retained, a man who serviced the instruments of concert halls, was on a year-long sabbatical in Japan. Irritated, Daniel performed a cursory online search. "Found someone," he announced one evening, not looking up from his tablet. "Independent chap, workshop in the old warehouse district, claims a speciality in reanimating heritage instruments. Probably full of mystical nonsense, but he can come tomorrow. If he's an idiot, we'll just wait for Harrington to return." The man who presented himself at the heavy oak door the following afternoon defied easy categorization. His name was Arlo, and he carried with him an air not of subservience, but of deep, quiet focus, like a woodsman entering a familiar forest. He was perhaps in his late 30s, but his demeanor suggested an ageless patience. He was tall, lean, with the sinewy strength of someone who worked with his hands, but there was no aggression in it. His hair, the color of dark walnut, was threaded with silver and tied carelessly at his nape. His eyes were a calm, observant hazel, the color of forest peat, and they took in the grand hallway, the soaring ceiling, the silent opulence, without a flicker of awe or judgment. He wore simple dark cotton trousers and a collarless linen shirt, its sleeves rolled precisely to his elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle and a fine lattice of pale old scars, the signature of a life engaged with tangible, often unyielding, materials. He smelled of beeswax, cedar, and the faint, clean scent of metal. He offered no smile, no polite preamble. "Mrs. Thorne," he said, his voice a low, resonant instrument that seemed to vibrate in the marrow of the house's ancient bones. The ailing F sharp, "May I see the patient?" He was shown to the music room. He did not immediately approach the piano. He stood for a long moment in the center of the room, his gaze sweeping over the silk-covered walls, the framed musical scores, the piano itself, a monolith of ebony under a diffuse shaft of afternoon light. He then walked to the instrument and did something that struck Clara as profoundly intimate. He laid both palms flat on its closed lid, closed his own eyes, and stood perfectly still, as if listening through his skin. The gesture lasted a full minute. The house, already silent, seemed to hold its breath. "It's not sick," he pronounced finally, opening his eyes and lifting the lid with a reverence one might afford a sacred text. "It's in mourning. It's been listening to this beautiful silence for too long. Sound is its reason for being. This, this quiet is a kind of starvation." He bent into the piano's great golden harp, his voice becoming muffled. "The felt on the hammers is hardened, not from use, but from disuse, like a muscle atrophied. The soundboard is tense, waiting. Wood has memory, Mrs. Thorne. This wood remembers music. Now it only remembers the expectation of music, which is a crueler thing." His work was a ritual, a form of secular communion. He did not merely attack tuning pins with a brute lever. He used a collection of specialized hand-forged tools, tapping, listening, his ear so close to the strings, Clara could see the individual lashes of his closed eyes. He spoke not to her, but to the instrument in a low, continuous murmur. "Yes, I know. Stubborn, aren't you? There's the tension. Let it go. You can let it go now. That's it." He used thin strips of virgin wool felt to gently tease the compacted hammerheads, a process he called voicing. It was less like repair and more like therapy. When he was satisfied, he struck the offending key. The note that emerged was a revelation. It was not just in tune, it was alive. It bloomed in the still air, a vibrant, complex tone that shimmered with overtones, holding its resonance before fading with a gentle, melancholic decay into a silence that was now irrevocably different. It was a silence that remembered song. "Play something," he said, turning to her, wiping his hands on a soft, lint-free cloth. I I don't play, not really. It's more of an heirloom, a piece of the family narrative." The excuse sounded hollow even to her. Those peat-colored eyes held hers, and in their depths she saw neither pity nor impatience, but a quiet, unnerving comprehension. "An heirloom that can sing is a responsibility," he said simply. "To let it stay silent is a form of cowardice. Humor me. A scale. A single chord." Flustered, feeling like a child under a tutor's gaze, she sat on the velvet-covered bench. Her hands, which expertly manipulated a computer mouse to create sleek digital designs, felt alien and clumsy on the ivory keys. She pressed middle C. The sound was so rich, so present, it seemed to push against her skin. She played a simple C major triad. The chord filled the room, a statement of shocking substance. She hadn't touched a piano since forced childhood lessons, an endeavor abandoned for being insufficiently productive. This sound here now was pure, unproductive sensation. It was glorious. A faint, genuine smile touched Arlo's lips, transforming his serious face. "It remembers, even if you've forgotten." He packed his tools with the same deliberate care. "It will settle. The adjustment is as much psychological as mechanical. Play it, even if it's just nonsense. Give it a reason to be." After he left, the villa felt charged, as if the corrected note had recalibrated its very atmosphere. Daniel, when he returned, noticed only the absence of the annoying dead thud. But Clara found herself drawn to the music room. At first, she only sat beside the piano, her hand resting on its cool flank. Then she began to tentatively press keys, discovering melodies she didn't know she remembered, chords that resonated in the hollow places inside her. The music was fumbling, amateurish, shot through with errors, but it was hers. It was the first autonomous, uncurated act she had performed in her own home in years. The Bechstein, however, once awakened, proved to be a sensitive, temperamental entity. The dry, controlled air of the villa, perfect for preserving art, was anathema to a living instrument of wood and wire. A key began to stick with a soft, protesting sigh. A string in the bass developed a metallic buzz. She called Arlo back. Each visit became a tiny, luminous island of reality in the vast, placid sea of her performative existence. Their conversations began to stray from the piano. He spoke of the forests of the Bavarian Alps, where the resonant spruce for soundboards was harvested only in winter under a waning moon, of the lost art of hand-forging piano wire, of how every instrument had a unique voice, a soul forged from its materials and its history. This one, he said once, running a hand along the Bechstein's rim, has a melancholy soul. It's heard a great deal of Beethoven, late period, and a fair amount of tears, I'd wager. The wood soaks up emotion like a sponge. It's all in there, vibrating at a frequency too low to hear, but not to feel. In turn, she found herself telling him things she had never voiced aloud. The soul-crushing tedium of her charity galas, the weight of the unspoken expectations to be the perfect decorative partner, the chilling fear that her own interior life was as meticulously arranged and as empty as the villa's rooms. He listened not as a confessor, but as a craftsman listens to the grain of wood, diagnosing the source of a warp, understanding the material's inherent nature. "You're like a string tuned to the wrong pitch," he observed one gray afternoon, his gaze direct. "You're vibrating, but not at your fundamental frequency. You're making the sound someone else asked for. It's no wonder you feel splintered." The shift from philosophical alignment to physical inevitability was as gradual and profound as the change in tension across a piano's frame with the seasons. It happened during his fourth visit. She was attempting a passage from a Satie gymnopédie, her touch too heavy, the melody earthbound. He stood behind her, reached around, and placed his large, warm hands over hers. His skin was dry, the palms calloused, the touch electrifying in its simplicity. "You're fighting it," he murmured, his voice a vibration against her temple. His hands didn't press. They guided, shaping the air, suggesting the weightlessness of the notes. "The music isn't in the force, it's in the surrender. It's in the space between the notes you allow." His chest was a solid wall of heat against her back. The world narrowed to the point of contact between their skin, the scent of him, wood smoke and sage filling her senses. He held the pose for a breath that lasted an eternity, then stepped back. The air between them crackled with the energy of a truth acknowledged but not yet spoken. The kiss, when it finally came, was not an act of passion but of consummation. It was the logical, beautiful resolution to the suspended chord that had been humming between them for months. It happened in the dusty golden light of a late autumn afternoon, the room silent but for their breathing. It was deep, slow, and tasted of black tea and a profound, aching honesty. With Arlo, Clara did not feel like a piece in a collection. She felt like a forgotten sonata being played for the first time. Every note, even the discordant ones, essential and true. The architecture of her deceit was complex and cold. The lies to Daniel were spare, elegant variations on a theme. The humidity fluctuations are challenging for an instrument this age. "He's doing a full regulation. It's a slow process." Daniel, a man who placed ultimate faith in expertise and invoices, accepted the explanations. His trust was the solid, load-bearing wall against which she now leaned her treacherous ladder. With Arlo, she entered a world of sublime, messy authenticity. His workshop, located in a converted Victorian brewery, was a cathedral of creative chaos. Sunlight streamed through high, grimy windows, illuminating floating galaxies of sawdust. The skeletons of pianos stood like ancient beasts in various states of dissection and rebirth. The air was thick with the smells of shellac, pine resin, and ambition. He showed her how to listen to the ping of a perfectly seated tuning pin, how to feel the life in a piece of aged mahogany. They shared flask tea and thick sandwiches, talking about Persian poetry, the physics of resonance, the quiet tragedy of beautiful things left unused. He was passion rendered into practical action, a man who believed in the holiness of true materials and the grace of skilled labor. He was the rich, complex, sometimes dissonant harmony to Daniel's sleek, predictable, and ultimately sterile melody. In the villa, she became a virtuoso of duplicity. She discussed portfolio allocations with Daniel, smiled serenely at his colleagues' wives, selected fabric swatches for a future nursery that felt like a theatrical prop, all while the memory of Arlo's workshop, the gritty reality of it, the feel of his work-roughened hands on her skin, played on a continuous, secret loop in her mind. She maintained the impeccable facade of her curated life with a new, desperate intensity, as if its pristine surface could magically negate the fault line now splitting its foundation. The collapse, when it arrived, did so not with a dramatic crash, but with the clean, sickening snap of a bridge cable failing under a stress it was never designed to bear. Daniel, working from home on a groundbreaking paper, took a break and wandered towards the music room, drawn by the sound of music. Not the familiar, polished recordings they sometimes played, but something raw, improvisational, a blues-tinged melody that seemed to weep and yearn. He stood unseen in the shadowed doorway. Clara was at the piano, her body swaying slightly, her face illuminated by an expression of unguarded, transporting joy he had not witnessed in all their years together. She was not performing, she was communing. The music was a private language, and she was deep in conversation. When the last note faded, she turned and saw him. The light in her eyes died, replaced by a panic so stark it was a confession in itself. "That was unfamiliar," he said, his voice dangerously calm, the voice he used when a surgical procedure presented an unexpected anomaly. "Just, experimenting," she said, closing the keyboard lid with a definitive, guilty thud. "You've been doing a lot of experimentation lately," he observed, stepping into the room. His architect's eyes, trained to see structure and stress, scanned her face, her posture, the very air around her. With the piano, and with its caretaker, it was not a question. It was a statement of observed data. Her heart hammered a frantic, allegro rhythm against her ribs. He's an artist. The piano is an artistic instrument. It requires a certain sensibility. Daniel walked to the Bechstein, ran a clinical finger along its edge. This piano was maintained for 40 years by Harrington with biannual one-hour visits. This artist has been here for over 20 hours in the past 2 months. He turned his gaze on her, and the confusion she saw there was worse than anger. It was the bewilderment of a man whose fundamental understanding of physics of cause and effect, of structural integrity, had just been violated. "Clara, what is happening? Is the piano genuinely this fragile? Or is there another variable in the equation I'm not accounting for?" She could have lied. She could have woven an elaborate story about rare woodworm, about German engineering, about microclimates. But under the relentless, analytical weight of his hurt gaze and exhausted by the monumental effort of sustaining the double life, the truth emerged, not as a shout, but as a defeated exhale. "The variable is me," she whispered, the words scraping her throat raw. The confession that unspooled was halting, graceless, soaked in shame. She spoke of the silence, of feeling like a preserved specimen under glass, of Arlo, of the workshop, of the kiss that had felt less like a betrayal and more like a homecoming. She did not utter the words, "I love him," but they saturated the space between them, more damning than any shouted declaration. Daniel listened. He did not interrupt. He absorbed the information as if receiving a terminal diagnosis for a patient he had believed to be in perfect health. His face underwent a terrifying transformation. The familiar planes of assurance and affection dissolved, leaving behind the stark, cold geometry of utter devastation. When her voice finally faltered into silence, he simply stared at the piano as if it were the primary pathogen. A piano tuner, he said finally, the term stripped of all the poetry, the depth, the sacred craft it held for her. In his mouth it was a trade, a function, a fixer of broken noises. You have compromised everything, our home, our trust, our future, for a man who corrects imperfections in wood and wire. He didn't correct an imperfection, she sobbed, the dam breaking at last. He showed me I was an instrument that had never been played. Daniel's face hardened, the pain freezing into something sharp and contemptuous. And I, by providing a stable environment, was the case that kept you silent. Is that it? He turned and walked to the door, his movements stiff, robotic. He paused, his back a rigid line of defeat. Pack what you need and leave. I don't care where you go, but you will not spend another night under this roof. You have turned a legacy of beauty into the backdrop for a sordid cliché. Get out. The packing was a surreal, out-of-body dissection of a life. She moved through the rooms like a ghost, placing items in a suitcase with numb, clumsy hands. She did not go to Arlo's workshop. A profound, instinctive knowledge told her his world of essential truths and clean lines could not absorb the toxic, complex wreckage of hers. He was a restorer of harmony, not a trauma surgeon for shattered lives. She booked a room in a corporate transit hotel, the sterile, humming silence a bitter parody of the resonant quiet she had known. Her text to him was a bare, bleak telegram. He knows. The reply came not for a day, then two. The wood will remember your song. When she finally went to the brewery, it was too late. The space was empty, swept clean. A neighboring artist told her Arlo had sold his lease, packed his tools into a vintage van, and left the city. Headed north, maybe to the islands. No address, no forwarding. He had heard the final, irreconcilable discord, not just between her and Daniel, but within her own life, and had chosen to stop listening. He had opted for the integrity of a clean silence over the cacophony of a broken composition. Clara did not contest the divorce. It was swift, mediated by efficient lawyers speaking a language of severance and closure. She used a modest settlement to rent a top-floor flat in a bustling, unpretentious neighborhood. The windows rattled, the plumbing groaned. The walls were painted a defiant, sunny yellow. She sold the few pieces of jewelry Daniel had given her, elegant cold stones, and used the money to buy a small pre-war upright piano from a community center sale. It was scarred, its case was chipped, its tone was bright and slightly brash, unburdened by lineage or expectation. She bought a basic tuning kit and a stack of manuals. She learned to tune it herself. The process was agonizingly slow. She broke strings, created horrifying wolf tones, spent hours bringing a single unison into shaky alignment. But she learned. She learned to listen with a new, patient ear. She learned that harmony was not the absence of conflict, but a tense, beautiful agreement between opposing forces. She played this imperfect, honest instrument every day. The music that emerged was sometimes a furious storm, sometimes a lament, often a simple, searching melody. It was never polished. It was never for show. It was the sound of a woman painstakingly detuning herself from a life that was a beautiful, suffocating forgery, and slowly, painfully, note by resonant note, teaching herself to vibrate at her own fundamental frequency, to find a new kind of harmony in the authentic, uncharted, and blessedly real silence of her own becoming.